Welcome to the Industry Experts panel at PortfolioWealthGlobal.com. My name is Michelle Holliday. Thanks so much for joining us for this special interview with one of the greats. Robert Moriarty is one of the first people to launch a website focused upon gold and commodities. He has been featured in many financial publications over the years and runs a very popular website called 321gold.com, where our economic situation is covered extensively. Today we have him on the show to discuss many of the important topics of 2018. Bob, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm very good. Thank you.
Bob, I want to start right off the top with what is happening in the Middle East. Do you fear an escalation between Syria and Israel, or will this be contained?
I hope there's not an escalation. I want to point something out. The Middle East has been a total disaster for the United States, and this goes back to 70 years of poorly thought out policies. The United States has given total, absolute support to Israel, and Israel, wants to be the major power in the Middle East. So what they've done has gotten the United States to fight their wars for them. The United States has no interest in Syria. We have troops there. They're there illegally. We were supporting the terrorists, and we were trying to overthrow the democratically elected government of Assad. Now, don't take the position that because I think we shouldn't do that I support Assad. He's a thug. Everybody in the Middle East is a thug. That's just as true as Israel and Egypt and Jordan and Syria and Libya and Somalia. It's true of all of those idiots. But you should only fight wars when you've got something to defend. The idea of unlimited aggression on the part of the United States. Under the Obama administration at one time, we were at war with Libya. We were at war with Afghanistan. We were at war with Pakistan. We were at war with Iraq. We were at war with Iran, Somalia, Sudan, and Syria.
Wow.
For what? Now, the interesting thing is, and I were talking before the interview about the book that I wrote about investing, but I also wrote about a book about my time in the military. And I was in the Marine Corps for 6 years, and I spent 2 years in Vietnam, and I understand a lot about combat. Every major civilization gets so wealthy because they have control, they're the world's reserve currency, they start fighting stupid wars. It happened to the Romans, it happened to the French, it happened to the Italians, it happened to the Dutch, it happened to the Russians, it happened to France, it happens to everybody. So the United States has bankrupted itself. And the real central issue, and literally virtually nobody talks about this, the United States is going to cause a collapse of the world's financial system because the United States is totally, absolutely, utterly bankrupt. If you should not fight a war, don't fight a war. Now, we have no interest in Syria. I wish that Israel would stay out, but if Israel thinks it needs to do something in Syria, Israel should do it, not have the United States be their attack dog.
Now, Bob, in regards to that, it is extremely important to protect yourself from market shocks. Portfolio Wealth Global has released an exclusive report for our audience on how to protect a portfolio from black swan events. Go to portfoliowealthglobal.com/crash to download this important free report. Bob, Ray Dalio, one of the world's most successful fund managers, announced in Davos Economic Forum not even a month ago that we are in a Goldilocks period and that holding cash is not going to be prudent. But the market action last week made him change his call. Now he sees the Federal Reserve's job as close to impossible when it comes to managing the tightening period and to make sure the economy is not overheated. First, what do you think of the fact that Ray Dalio was willing to admit his mistake and change his perspective to now release data which points to the fact that we are nearing the end of a cycle? And secondly, do you see stocks continuing to rise further from here? Was this just an overdue correction?
No, it's long since overdue. Here's the deal. Since 2008, the central banks, and I include the EU, I include Japan, I include the United States, have pumped money into the system. And what they have done is they have rewarded imprudence. If you were a bank and you made bad loans, rather than let the bank go under, which is it's just good business, we paid the banks off. We gave them money. We gave them unlimited credit. That's a bad idea. And all this money got pumped into the system and just blew the value of the assets up. The malinvestment in the world today is just absolutely terrifying. Everybody that I talk to that ever passed Economics 101 recognizes there are some bad things coming. Now, the quote that you used for Ray, as soon as you started it, I thought, ooh, this is going to get interesting. In my book, okay, nobody knows anything. Learn to ignore the experts, the gurus, and other fools. The experts are always saying exactly the wrong thing right at tops. And just before everything crashed, he said cash is a bad place to be. Well, the very best place you could be 10 days ago was in cash. Now, to the extent that, yes, he's recovered and he's changed his tune, but he was absolutely dead wrong, and he should have been saying you should be in cash.
Now, Bob, you just mentioned your book, Nobody Knows Anything. That's the title of it, and I find that astounding because that book is amazing. You seem to know everything before it happens. Could you please tell us a little bit about it?
Well, here's what's very funny, and I'm going to disagree with you. I don't. I'm not an expert.
Well, I was amazed at how many things that you were able to accurately predict that were different than what most people were predicting.
That's true. But here's the key. There are no experts and there's no gurus. There's just a bunch of people running around with opinions. Now, the strange thing is, because of human behavior, we listen to the people who tell us what we want to hear. I'm going to ask you kind of a trick question. I want you to think about it carefully. Would you vote for an honest politician?
I would hope to, but the problem is, how do you tell who's honest and who isn't? In the age that we're in right now, I don't know, Bob.
Well, here's what's funny. Basically, we never elect honest politicians. And the reason is because we want to elect people who tell us the stories we want to hear. Now, if you're starting out in the newsletter business and you don't know anything and you want to make money, all you have to do is figure out what do people want to hear. Now, you can pump gold, you can pump silver, you can pump Bitcoin, you can pump the VIX, you can pump the S&P, you can pump real estate, you can pump anything, okay? What do people want to hear? Now, people are a herd animal. Nobody wants to understand this. Nobody wants to hear it, but it's true. We behave as a herd. But if you're going to make money in investing, you have to be a contrarian. Now, let me give you the best example that I think that I've ever seen. One, that I'm not an expert, and two, anybody can do it. The book costs $4 and it will teach you how to do it. If people will go to my site, if they will read an article that I wrote that was posted on Streetwise on January 26th, I talked about 12 commodities. And I said the daily sentiment indicator on these 12 commodities was indicating an extreme of emotion. And what was unusual about that was that it was 1 out of 3 commodities was showing an extreme of emotion. And that's a very unusual thing. And I thought that these markets were going to turn. Now, of the 12 markets that I predicted were going to turn, how many turned? 12.
All 12?
All 12. Now, here's what's interesting. If you read the article carefully, you realize there isn't a single word of opinion. You're not hearing what Bob Moriarty thinks. Okay, you're hearing here is a mathematical number that's available to anybody on these 12 commodities. And sentiment says if it gets to 100, everybody wants to buy. If it gets to 0, everybody wants to sell. When you get to an extreme of emotion, you're going to have a turn. None of that is opinion. It's all fact. And literally anybody who read my book could have gone to the daily sentiment indicator and made exactly the same prediction. And the point that I make in the book, and the point that I keep trying to make to people, I'm not a genius. I'm just an ordinary guy. Now, I've been around for a long time, okay, so I've got to see things happen again and again and again. I've made every mistake in investing. I mean, it's nobody listening to this who has made a mistake that I haven't made before. But what I didn't do is keep making the same mistake again and again and again. I predicted the top in Bitcoin very accurately in mid-December, and the only other people that I know that did that was Clive Mont and Peak Prosperity, Chris Martenson. But it was very predictable because it was a curvilinear parabolic move, and those moves always collapse of their own weight. If people would use the information that's available to them, either free or very cheap, they could do the same thing. There are no experts. Let me give you an example. Do you know John McAfee?
Oh, yeah. Not personally.
Yeah. Is he a genius?
I would say he's up there.
I would say he's an absolute genius. In December, he said bubbles are mathematically impossible in this new paradigm. And he tried to top that with the following vanquishing of gold. Gold is laughable compared to cryptocurrencies. How do you fractionalize gold? How do you ship it? It's physical, so how do you safely store it? It was good for people 3,000 years ago. Today, it's inherently worthless. Soon it will drop in value as cryptocurrencies climb. Now, that's probably the dumbest thing I've ever heard anybody say about investing. Okay? Mm-hmm. He's talking about gold. It's physical. So how do you store it? Well, hell, he could do the same thing I do. He could shove it under his mattress. It was good for people 3,000 years ago. Today, it's inherently worthless. Well, actually, for 5,000 years, it's been valuable. Okay? How do you ship it? Well, you could ship it via FedEx if you feel like it. I mean, that works. How do you fractionalize gold? Well, I've got some Indian coins that weigh about a tenth of a gram piece of the world's smallest gold coins. You can make little tiny coins out of gold. So all of these things that he's saying about gold that have a 5,000-year history, none of them are true. So then he talks about Bitcoin. And, you know, we don't know what the story of Bitcoin is. We're not going to know for a year or two. We can only guess now. But he says bubbles are mathematically impossible. Well, we've lost $500 billion in the Bitcoin cryptocurrencies in the last 6 weeks. So I think that was probably a bad call on his part. Do you know who Stanley Fischer was?
I've heard the name.
Okay, you actually know who he is. You just have a hard time putting a pin to it. In September of 1929, do you know what Stanley Fischer said? Stocks have hit a permanently high plateau. Of course, he nailed the top. At the top of every single bubble, you have someone with enormous amount of credibility coming out and supporting the bubble. Now, I know you know who Sir Isaac Newton is.
Of course.
Okay. Sir Isaac Newton, one of the greatest geniuses in history, lost his fortune in the South Sea bubble. And he said, I can predict the movement of stars, but I cannot predict the actions of men. And that's absolutely true. Okay. Mm-hmm. So the key is, you don't need to listen to John McAfee. You don't need to listen to Sir Isaac Newton. You don't need to listen to Stanley Fischer. These guys are always wrong. You need to learn to think for yourself. And it's actually a lot easier than people realize.
Now, Bob, shifting back to gold, gold has been above the 1,300 mark for the majority of 2018 so far, which is obviously good for the large miners like Barrick. They're finally making some very fat margins. Silver, however, has been lagging behind. The gold to silver ratio is now back to 80 to 1. Is this the final bottom for miners here? And is silver the key for this sector to attract speculators?
That's a really good question. And I'm going to say here that I'm going to give you an opinion that's not factual. That's not something that came down the mountain with Moses. It's my opinion. I could be wrong. I could be right. And, there's no money back guarantee, but it's my opinion. I think the silver gold ratio is a barometer of the health of the financial system. And when it goes above 80 to 1, it means there's cracks in the financial system. It's like the birds getting upset before a earthquake. Okay, they sense something that's going on. I think the financial system is cracking. I think it is breaking. I think there's some bad times ahead, and that's what the silver gold ratio is saying. Now, one of the investments that I talk about in the book is trading the silver gold spread. If you want to make money in investing, it's really simple. You want to buy things when they're cheap, and you want to sell them when they're dear. Now, we don't know if $1,300 gold is correct or not. And we don't know if $16 silver is correct or not. Do you agree with that?
Of course.
Okay. But one of the things that we can say through 100 years of history, we could say the ratio of silver to gold has varied from 16 to 1 to 100 to 1. So when it's at 80 to 1, it's saying that silver's cheap and gold's expensive. Okay, and that's actually very valuable information. I absolutely say the silver gold ratio could go higher, but I think that silver and platinum, especially platinum, are very cheap relative to the other metals, and I think they will go higher.
Just a brief note to our audience here. When it comes to gold stocks, make sure that you download the complete free manual on all of the various models of resource stocks at portfoliowealthglobal.com/gold playbook. Bob, let's talk about the coming recession in terms of what our centralized planners have in form of tools, such as the ones that they've used throughout this cycle, like slashing interest rates, QE programs, and asset purchases. Obviously, the fact that they are just now raising rates, unwinding their balance sheets, and having to call off their bond purchases, there seems to be no way that they can reverse course. They are out of tools. Could the next recession mark the end of this current economic system?
Okay, you're talking about the next recession. Don't you mean the next depression?
Oh, what are your thoughts?
Well, you've asked a good question. And under the British education system, the question is far more important than the answer. You have to ask the right question to get the right answer. If you ask the wrong question, you get the wrong answer all of the time. We're actually not headed into a recession. We're headed into a full-blown depression. There are so many pieces of the economic pie that are have been totally distorted. Real estate prices, bond prices, currencies. How can you have the lowest interest rates in 5,000 years? I mean, what has changed? Interest is what someone pays to cover the risk. Okay, how can you have Italy have negative interest rates on 30-year bonds? That's insane. Okay, but we're in an area that's so stupid because everybody's listening to the experts, everybody's listening to the guru. They're saying this can't possibly blow up. Well, there was a hedge fund in New York that lost $1 billion and went out of business in 2 days last week because they were short the VIX. From December and actually high in the pseudocurrencies was in early January. But from December until now, the pseudocurrencies have lost $500 billion. Now, it may not be real money to you and me, but if you had $100 million, and there were a lot of guys who had $100 million in Bitcoin, and they didn't sell, half that money went to Bitcoin heaven. Now, I made a comment, and we're not going to know for a long time whether it's true or not. I said that destruction of the cryptocurrencies could lead into a cascading default. It would be interesting to see in hindsight how much that contributed to the S&P crashing, the NASDAQ crashing, the VIX exploding, gold going down. Everybody thought gold should go up if the market crashed. So I don't know. Did it start a cascading default? We don't know. In 1932, there was a bank in Austria called the Credit Anstalt, and it was a bank owned by the Rothschilds, and the bank defaulted. When a bank advertises on television, they talk about having $500 million in assets. Do you know what those assets are?
No, please continue.
There's two forms. They are loans, okay, real estate loans, business loans, car loans, etc. And they're also bonds of other banks. Okay, so when that one bank collapsed, and it was a little tiny bank, it started a cascading default that ended up closing all of the banks in the United States and most of the banks in the world. The world's financial system is a precarious bubble, and it may have run into a pin 2 weeks ago.
Oh, wow. So what is your prediction on this?
Whether it's going to be next week, next month, or next year, I don't know. There is going to come a time when it's going to be an utter disaster. Most people are going to be wiped out financially. Now, let's go back to your original question. Your original correction was, the central banks appear to be out of bullets. What's going to happen in the next, we're going to change the term, the next depression. And you made a really good point, because central banks are out of bullets. Now, I spent 2 years in combat, and let me tell you something. When you're out of bullets, you're out of time.
Well, now, Bob, what kind of picture does that depict, specifically for the United States, but overall generally for the world? Putting it in very direct terms, what do you see?
Well, the United States is in the midst of a coup d'etat of the Democrats, apparently, against the Republicans. It's absolutely unequivocal. The FBI, the NSA, the CIA got involved in the political process, the whole Russian dossier, Russian involvement on behalf of Trump. We know that's all nonsense. We have government officials who were dirtier than any government officials in American history. And it's not a coup d'etat that started and stopped. It's an ongoing coup d'etat. We still have agencies of the United States lying through their teeth, covering evidence and withholding information. It's so much bigger than Watergate that it's crazy. And the only thing that I could say is it's going to end badly. Do you know what Martha Stewart went to jail for?
Yeah, it was something ridiculous. Something about, I think she got a hint about a stock or something.
She did. That's not why she went to jail. The FBI interviewed her, and they didn't take notes, and they didn't record it, and they asked her, and they said that she lied about it. Now, we don't know if that's true or not, okay? Because it's their word against hers, okay? But Martha Stewart went to jail, I think, for 18 months, charged with, convicted of lying to the FBI. Now, you know who Huma Ahmadine is, don't you?
Of course.
Okay. She was interviewed by the FBI under oath, We have this, we have the transcripts, we know exactly what she said. And she said there were no recordings of the emails. She did not save the emails that she had from Hillary Clinton. We also know those same emails were on Anthony Weiner's laptop. Now, how much time has Huma Abedin served?
I don't believe she served anything.
She hadn't even been tried. And you know why she hadn't been tried?
Please tell us.
She hadn't been charged. If you're a Democrat and you lie to the FBI under oath, we don't care. We got James Clapper lying. We've got Hillary Clinton lying. We've got the entire DNC lying. Hillary Clinton was running an $80 million money laundering scheme where the money that was supposedly going to the DNC was actually going to her. There were so many laws violated. It's absolutely staggering. And the amazing thing is, nobody's in jail.
Bob, in light of the situation that we have going on, economically speaking, as you know, between 2009 and 2014, owning stocks was a highly contrarian call. But the founder of Portfolio Wealth Global, Tom Beck, was especially bullish on the large indices, and he published a number of alerts, including AbbVie, 3M, Becton Dickinson, and W.W. Granger. But he was not bullish on commodities, as the system was unwinding and slowly growing. In 2017, we turned more bullish, and the recent market action makes us confident that commodity stocks are back. Bob, are you bullish at this point? And if so, are you actively building positions?
Okay, if you go back to my comment when I said buy things when they're cheap and sell them when they're dear, and it's no more complicated than that, commodities are at a 5,000-year low, and they are the lowest price they have been relative to the S&P in history. So the simple answer to your question that anybody that's read my book could answer correctly is I am wildly bullish on commodities. I'm not going to talk interest rates. I'm not going to talk Trump tax. I'm not going to talk wars in the Middle East. All of that's nonsense. In simple terms, commodities are cheap and equities are expensive, and that's a good time to buy.
I love your term, wildly bullish.
In a depression, okay, where are you physically right now?
I'm in San Diego, California.
Okay, if you walked outside your office or your home or anything, and you looked around and you knew that we had gone into a depression a month ago, but you walked out today, what would you see that's different?
Well, truthfully, if I just opened up the door and looked outside, I don't think that anything physically would look much different at all.
Thank you. Okay. In a depression, nothing changes. Every building still exists. Every tool still exists. Your 1967 Corvette still exists. Your Bitcoin still exists. All these things exist. The only thing that changes is who owns them. We're going to have the greatest transfer of wealth in world history. We're going to transfer from the people who believe Bitcoin was a hell of a deal at $20,000 a Bitcoin, and that the VIX was a short that you could make money on all the time, and buying the FANG stocks you could never lose. Those people are going to give their money to the people who look at things like commodities and say, I don't know anything about commodities, but damn, they're cheap.
Now, Bob, you have been extremely negative on cryptocurrencies. Has that changed at all?
Here's the problem, and I think it's a little bit wrong to say I'm negative. What I'm not is positive. I mean, I look at them, and I don't even call them cryptocurrencies. I call them pseudocurrencies. There are 1,513 of them, and I can't see any value that they add. Now, it's entirely possible that I'm just messing the whole picture. However, I've been around computers for 50 years. I just don't see any value. I talked to somebody a couple hours ago, and he was talking about how you could transfer unlimited amounts of money across the world virtually instantaneous at no cost. And I said, well, I can transfer $1 million to Tokyo for $25. I mean, why would I care? You know, what am I going to do? Save $25? I don't see anything. I can guarantee you, you're not going to have 1,500 cryptocurrencies survive. We have had the biggest bubble in world history, and a bubble typically, when it bursts, collapses 85 to 95%. So if cryptocurrencies go down 95%, come back to me, and maybe by then we're going to see something of real value. However, I just don't. I'm not anti-cryptocurrencies. A lot of guys made a lot of money on them, but I don't see anything of substance that would convince me that I want to own them.
Bob, shifting gears just a little bit with regards to the blockchain technology. I know that you are a believer that the underlying tech will streamline many industries and make commerce more efficient. Portfolio Wealth Global has researched this for months until Tom Beck and his team uncovered a blockchain company which has found for-profit centers to monetize the blockchain. We want to share the report with our audience on the company that Tom just found because it just started trading in Canada. Make sure that you download the complete report at portfoliowealthglobal.com/chain. Bob, do you see the business potential here? What is your perspective?
I do. However, based on my philosophy of investing, if you go back and you look at the gold and silver stocks back in 2001 and then in early 2009, you had dozens of stocks selling for less than the cash they had in the bank. I would want to see a crash. If we had a 95% decline, I would be looking very aggressively for someone who's figured out a way to monetize. I think that it's good, but let me give you an example. When I started in computers in the 1970s, early 70s, an accounting system cost you $10 million, and that's when gold was $35 an ounce, and you had to have 50 or 60 programmers to support it. You can go down at 7-Eleven and get an accounting program now for $29. I don't see any, incredible value to a distributed accounting system, and that's really what it is. There's some nice things that it can do, but I don't see it adding value to anything. Now, not for a minute am I going to tell you I'm a guru and I'm an expert. I'm not. I just don't see it. Maybe it's there. Maybe I missed it.
Bob, let's talk about the trajectory of the USD, especially with the news that China has finally commenced on its own oil future contracts, denominated in yuan, which is a terrible blow to the US dollar. Do you feel that this is going to impact the demand for the USD negatively?
Okay, every currency gets 70 to 80 years. The US dollar started becoming the world's reserve currency in 1944. We've had our 70 to 80 years. The really funny thing is we look for all kinds of complicated reasons, say the dollar's going up, the dollar's going down. It really is simple. You can look at the British pound, you can look at the Dutch guilder, you can look at the Spanish peso. Everybody gets 75 to 85 years for that currency. It has to do with human behavior. It has to do with thoughts like the fourth turnings. Every 4 generations, everything changes, and a generation is about 18 to 20 years. So, the United States has had it. I'll give you a number that's kind of interesting. For 18 of the last 20 centuries, there were 2 economies that led the world. Okay, they were the biggest, most important economies. For 18 of the last 20 centuries, do you have any idea what those 2 economies were? China and India. We believe we're smarter now and things are different now. and central banks can change things, and our leaders are smarter and more powerful. And it's all BS. It's just that's simply not true. You need to understand history, and you need to look at what's going on. The Chinese are going to succeed, and it doesn't make a rat's ass what the U.S. dollar does. The Chinese are going to succeed. They're extremely hardworking people. They're good people. They're not aggressive people. They're not waging war all over the world, and they're going to succeed. And I think that's wonderful, and I think that we ought to be trying to get along with them.
So this is a natural pattern.
Yeah, of course.
Lastly, Bob, the path of the Trump administration has been to cut taxes and roll out a massive infrastructure plan, which may or may not pass in Congress. How will the United States be able to keep these deficits going without paying a bigger price?
Well, it depends on what you believe in the power of prayer. Because it's going to take one mighty, powerful God to keep this from crashing. If Donald Trump isn't on his knees 8 hours every night, we're going to be in deep doo-doo. What he is doing is absolutely contrary to every rule of economics. We're bankrupt now, okay?
So you don't see this as a positive move?
Well, I think it's a total disaster. Let me give you an example. One of the things that nobody thinks about, we talk about taxes because taxes impact us directly and we understand taxes. But the real number that we should be thinking about is money that government spends. When government spends money, they have to collect it. Am I correct?
Of course.
Okay. Now give me 3 ways they can collect money.
I would say taxes, taxes, taxes.
No, taxes are one way. It's the way we're most familiar with. But inflation is a tax. Am I correct?
Yep.
Okay. I mean, if you owe $1 million and you could somehow reduce the value of the $1 million, then you don't owe $1 million anymore. And the other way is outright default. Okay, this idea that you can go under the first Bush, the U.S. government debt went from $1 billion to $2 billion, and everybody thought, God, I mean, this is absolutely horrible. We're doing that every year. Okay, this is so crazy. Okay, and Donald Trump, who claims to be a businessman, says, I'm going to go out and spend more money than I have. Well, Donald, that's what got you into bankruptcy in the first place. Didn't you learn anything? You cannot spend your way to prosperity. Now, I'm sorry, but it doesn't make any difference whether you're a liberal or a Republican or a Democrat or a communist. You cannot spend your way to prosperity, and you can't make wealth by printing pieces of paper.
Bob, this has been an amazing interview. I want to thank you so much for being on this show. Please share with our audience, what is the best way to follow your work?
Well, it's pretty simple. The website's free. It's 321gold.com. One of the things, and I hope that you'll throw some comment on this, one of the things I highly recommend to people, and I'm not doing it because I'm trying to pimp my book. I think I get 34 cents every time one gets sold. But I've written a book. I've written half a dozen books. But the most important book that I've written is Nobody Knows Anything. And it's a book that you can read in 2 hours. It's simple. If you read on an iPad or a computer, they're $4, and I think it's $10 if you get the paper copy. It has investment advice that you will get nowhere else. And it's not, I'm not going to pump this or pump this or pump this because I've got a vested interest. I'm trying to show people how they can take the information that they've got available to them already and use it to increase their financial stability, to make money instead of losing money. I'll give you a perfect example. The most important chapter in the book is when to sell. And I can guarantee you that there's $500 billion that investors wish they had sold in December, but they were too cheap to spend $4 on my book.
I agree because you did predict it in your book.
Yeah, of course. Well, that's just one. I mean, I was a fighter pilot when I was 20. People talk to me, or people talk about me and say, well, he's arrogant. When you're a fighter pilot at 20, you're going to be arrogant. Okay, I'm sorry. I don't do modest. But armed with the book and the information in the book, if people will learn to trust their own common sense and to ignore the gurus, ignore the people who are feeding them nonsense, they'll be a lot better off financially. You're either a contrarian or you're a victim. And I show people how to be a contrarian. I show people how to make money in a very simple way. I mean, none of it's complicated.
Well, we are glad that you don't do modest because your information is amazing. Bob, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for the time. Good luck.
Mr. Robert Moriarty, expert in the gold and commodities sector, author of Nobody Knows Anything, and the genius behind 321gold.com. For the Industry Experts panel, I'm Michelle Holliday at PortfolioWealthGlobal.com.